Welcome to Agile Clips, where we break down Agile into manageable pieces. In today's show, we discuss why well-prioritized and ordered backlogs are so important, how items should be added to them, and some techniques to manage them so that they are consumable by the delivery team. Hey Santosh, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? So,
Very
how
good.
was your trip?
Oh, fabulous vacation in Spain. Thank you for
Uh,
asking. Nothing
I'm
to do with
s-
Agile, but it was great.
that was a 2 weeks agile vacation, huh?
Yes, we were following a plan, however. That way we did get to see a lot of things and did a
Ah,
little improvising here and there, which was great.
awesome. All right. So, we are going to talk about backlogs.
Yes.
The more and more I go into details about any time of the coaching at different levels, uh, it's interesting that we have to go back to the basics of three key things that we need for being agile. I guess, having a complete cross-functional team, have a
Right.
clear backlog, and then producing working tested increments of a product. I mean, it's so imperative that everyone needs to focus on that, and that's what I'm constantly reminding people and myself, saying, "Are we talking about these three things or not?" So I think talking about backlogs is very critical.
That's right, because if you think about producing and tested software at regular intervals, but if you're not doing it according to some prioritized backlog, you might be building the wrong product. So
Yeah,
the
yeah,
backlogs are absolutely key.
yeah, and the couple of things about what the prioritized list and prioritized and ordered list is something that we always ask them to say is that, yeah, priority is one thing. Can you order it correctly so that we know in what order we are going to actually execute that backlog? And it goes to all levels of team, to the product, to the portfolio. That means at the leadership or the highest stakeholder level, all the way down to how the team is going to handle that broken down components of that the backlog. So the
Yeah,
backlog means different at the different levels of organization.
there's always more work than an organization or a team can take on. So
Correct.
prioritizing that work is really critical.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if you don't do it, then what happens is you end up with people multitasking, unfinished work, and
yeah,
lots of
exactly.
stress.
Yeah, yeah, and the I mean that's exactly what we are seeing everywhere is that the people create a backlog, but then they forget how to manage the backlog, and that's where things just keep on piling up, and everything that you manage for or plan for the sprints or whatever goes out the door, and nothing gets done. So it's like, why are we starting so many things at the same time?
Yeah, and another thing about prioritizing the backlog that people often forget is they think of it just as features that need to be added to a product, but they forget all the other work that needs to be done, which could be housekeeping work, it could be or any form of technical debt,
Yeah.
other things that don't happen ad hoc. They are known, they need to be worked on, but they need to be put into the backlog and prioritized with the agreement of, well, either the stakeholders in the company if it's a major re-architectural work that needs to go on, or with the
Correct.
product owner at the team level if it's just some set of bugs or more test automation that needs to be added, or something that will not allow
Correct.
the team to only work on features.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that brings up a good point about who all gets involved in ordering or prioritizing the backlog. In the sense, not just the business, not just it's all aspects of it. In the sense, how big is that thing that you need to do, and how will it, how long will it take to get it done? so that everyone understands what is going to take actually to get any feature or any story or anything else. Their definition of done type of things.
Right, right. The other big problem I've seen is where there are too many people who own the backlog. You really need one owner, and everybody can contribute to the backlog. I mean, architects, developers, anybody can put things in the backlog to record the fact that there's something that needs to be done, but it's really the product owner, if it's at the product level, that needs to be the one person who prioritizes. And there can be negotiation between the technical folks and
Correct.
marketing or whoever to decide what's the right balance, how much time should we put into dealing with technical debt versus features. But you need one
Yeah.
person to prioritize, otherwise it becomes a free for all, and then engineering managers step in and they try and throw something in there and they go around the system
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
something done, and that just causes
Well, the
problems.
one of the other things I think Ed we had talked about was I've seen it and I've done it also at multiple places is using the swim lane concept, level of service, in the sense that you have urgency, which is the swim lane where some all hands on deck, that kind of a thing. Then you have net new product uh, swim lane. Then there is a technical net swim lane, and then operations type of things, which is that is a swim lane. And then, as you were saying earlier, we allocate certain percentage of capacity of that team to each swim lane up front, so that everything gets the right amount of the capacity aligned, allocated. So people are not jumping onto each other. The things get done in each lane. And
Hmm.
that's more
Right.
conscious way of looking at it. Plus, it gives the visibility for all those things to everyone, saying, "Oh, we better do this technical debt, otherwise it'll keep on creeping up down the road." Or, well, because of these three emergencies, we need to limit how much we want to spend on the other things that the emergencies are, or how to handle the emergencies better. Those kind of things. That's the visibility, and then that's what the backlog needs to be more smartly or actually efficiently distributed. That way, it's not just a person's opinion going through that. It handles all different aspect of the system that needs to be delivered.
Right, right. Yeah.
Otherwise, it never completes.
Yeah, it's very helpful to have that additional visibility by having the swim lanes.
Yeah.
But I will mention a couple of situations I've been in when I was a product owner. One was I was in an organization where it became very apparent to me that the productivity of the team or what they would be able to deliver in every sprint was diminishing. And the reason was there was a lack of test automation. And every sprint, there was more and more testing that needed to be
Yeah,
done, which
because
took
the all the regression keeps on getting bigger and bigger.
exactly, exactly. So I made a conscious decision to give the team one sprint to only focus on building up test automation and not
Yeah.
working on features. And I had to go and justify it to my management, but I had to make that tough call, and I did, and it worked out just fine in the end. And
Yeah.
then another situation I was in, I had some technical folks who were just arguing with me that there was some set of issues that needed to be resolved. And because in the role of a product owner, I was in really close contact with our salespeople, really understood what was going on with our customers. These issues that the engineers wanted to fix, and I don't blame them for wanting to fix them, but they were specific to a feature that only one customer was using. And
Wow.
I knew that customer was not planning to renew their contract. So I had some visibility that the engineering team didn't have. And so in this case, I really had to put my foot down against the engineering organization and say, yes, I agree it makes sense from an engineering perspective, but the reality is nobody's going to care in a few weeks.
Right. Well, that what that brings up is the feedback loop, in the sense we need to know the backlog that is being created, how it's going to impact the end user or the consumer. If nobody's going to use that function, because that's the other thing that we started doing is to look at the feature usability. If the feature is not being used, why are we building it? So then manage the backlog that way that, hey, unless and until the features are being used by 50% or more than 50% of our customers, they don't get the priority. And that made the huge difference because now you are talking to a broader audience, their needs, and small thing that we do get spread across bigger user base. Now the impact gets better, everything gets better. So yeah, there is a continuous feedback loop as to what are we building? Are we building things that our end users need or not?
Yeah, that's the whole point of not doing planning for the next 2 years of development is to be able to react to what we learn and what's going
Exactly.
on.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one reason that in the backlog we usually have what you can think of it almost as placeholders, and the closer you get to implementing something, the more granular it should be and the more well defined. But when you're thinking a few months out, you really just have placeholders, and you shouldn't be spending a lot of time thinking about it.
Right, right. I think also we mentioned earlier the WIP limit, in the sense work in progress limit. That actually gives you that feedback very quickly because the things that you complete, you can start reading as to is it a pivot time or a scale time? The things that you sent out, is that something that really works or really is needed by or is it that, oh, we might have missed the requirement or what business was looking for, and let's pivot. So having that visibility sooner in the process than later when it is too late, I think that's the whole idea behind getting that WIP limit right up front.
Hmm.
And if you get done sooner, well, there is nothing stopping you from pulling the next highest priority one into the current sprint or current release. Doesn't matter, right? Because the previous ones are already done. So it helps to focus on few things to complete completely, get the feedback, and then build on the top of it. So that's how actually the backlog needs to be actively managed. It's not set in stone when it is there.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit about common pitfalls and solutions that we've seen and used. For example, I've definitely seen backlogs that are become unmanageable because they just have so many items in them. So one of the techniques for dealing with that is just really think, is this something I'm ever going to want as a product owner? And if not, just delete it. If it becomes an issue later on or something you want to address, you can always add it back in. But it's better not to be overwhelmed with the backlog. And then another technique that some people use is they really have a separate project. Let's say you're using Jira or whatever it is, rather than putting everything in one place. Things that are more in the early stages of thinking, you keep them separate, either in a separate Jira project or maybe even a Confluence page or wiki page, somewhere where they don't overwhelm let's say, the engineering organization. And by the way, if you really track cycle times and things like that, that's one benefit, that the clock only starts ticking when you're
As
sure
soon
that,
as it gets into the
yeah,
queue.
when you're sure that you're really going to do something, rather than,
Right.
oh, I have this idea.
Well, I think that's where the how your portfolio impact management needs to be refined, in the sense that what are the things that have qualified and say, yeah, now they are ready to be actually put into the the product backlog. Because there could be ideation, there could be way of validation. There are a certain level of things that need to happen first before it gets the funding or whatever those parameters are, so that we can actually start working on it. So I think, but even for the uh, you know the intake process, that backlog also has to be managed in a certain way, like what I think we had talked about the uh, Kanban sandwich. So the portfolio is managed at the Kanban style process, so that you can do only so many things from one to the next and ready for execution or getting into the product development. And the bottom where you go into operations goes into again Kanban, and the middle can be Kanban or Scrumban or some mixture of that. And that's how the product backlog gets deciphered through multi levels of organization.
Yes, right. So let's see. The next thing we probably should mention is issues with the prioritization not being correct. We
Mm.
already kind of covered it here, but I wanted to mention that in episode 6 of the podcast, we also went into a bit more depth and talked about some techniques.
Right.
So the other problem I've seen very often is when we have items in the backlog that are not consumable by the team, meaning that the granularity isn't correct. It's either more than can be done in one sprint, or it's just not broken down in a way that makes sense to the team.
Yeah, it's
And
like
that
having a fat, too thick stories or too huge epics. That kind of a
exactly,
challenge. So
exactly.
how, what is the size of the epic should look like? How's the size of the story should look like? Those are the kinds of things that everyone needs to be aware of, or at least the product owners and the team need to work together, saying that, oh, okay, well, we need to break it down to this level. And I think having that Fibonacci type of sizing really helps, in the sense that, if the story is more than 21 points, it has to be broken up. I mean, there are more exceptions, or it's more of an exception than a rule that it can be that big. But 99% of the time, if it's too big, you will be able to find out a way to slice it to a smaller and executable and fit into that sprint, or maybe two sprints. That's about it. But those are some guidelines, I guess, for managing the backlog. What components of the backlog should look like.
Right. And actually, just to piggyback on what you were saying, a situation I've seen quite often is where you have one backlog, but there are multiple teams that are working on it. So, for example, there's a cloud team, there's a front end team, there's
Right.
some back end team, and they're working together closely, but they are separate teams and they're probably working on multiple different products. So, as a product owner, you're creating a description of the functionality you expect the user to see. But
Correct.
in fact, all those teams end up having stories of their own, which is their breakdown of how that functionality will be implemented. And those go into the separate team backlogs.
Yeah. And I think,
So,
that brings up a very good, again, technique, I guess, that we use for like a what we call product or product board. So that's like what SAFe uses, the program increment planning, where you have the all the teams on the rows, and then each sprint, what each one of them is going to be delivering, so that there are dependencies across each other. And there may or may not be, but at least they should be visible. And then they're going to make sure that it delivers the product for especially that particular product line. Parts of the products are delivered in a consistent way when multiple teams are working on the same product. So making that visible and managing the backlog through that is very critical.
yep. And I can tell you from experience that however good a product owner you think you are, the way you think of stories is often not what the way the engineers think of it.
Yeah.
So they will want to break down things in a way that makes sense to them and sort of prioritize the tasks in a more logical way that will lead to a better result.
Right.
So the
Right.
product owner can't always second guess how the engineers will implement the work, and
Well,
they
that
shouldn't either.
yeah, I think that's the classic thing that we always tell the product owners that keep your thoughts or hands only to what and why. Do not jump into the how. Let the
Right.
engineers do the how. Because
Absolutely.
a lot of these product owners are technical and they want to say that, oh, I want this database to be this way. It's like, no, that's not your call. Let the team decide how to get it done. You tell them why we are doing it and what are we going to do. And then you together come up with say when we are going to do that. So now, there are definite areas of responsibility of why and what, how, and combined responsibilities when. And that's how the product backlog gets managed.
Yep, that's correct. Great. So, just so our listeners know, we keep a backlog of topics to talk about in these different podcasts. So, this one is now being executed and will be moving to post production shortly. And
Yes.
then, once it'll be published, we'll start working on the next one from the
Yeah,
top of the
so
backlog.
we eat our own dog food. We are agile. We actually do the WIP limits and we actually do the Kanban board for this.
That's
And
right.
so far, and we are getting the feedbacks, and then we refine that and add more things to the backlog. So even the podcasters are using the backlog the way it should be used.
That's right. Great.
Cool.
Thanks,
Well,
Santosh.
this was great. Well, and yeah, we have few more podcast schedules next couple of weeks. So now the frequency will increase because now the I guess vacations and everything else is behind us before we hit the Thanksgiving rush. But we'll try to get that done as much as we can.
Very good. Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Bye.